There's a moment in your life where everything you thought you knew about yourself just cracks. Mine happened at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, holding a pen I didn't mean to use in a room I wasn't supposed to be in. And the worst part? Someone in that room had been planning for my arrival for a very long time. Stay with me until the end because the thing I found out in the final weeks changed how I see everything. And I mean everything. Okay, so I need you to understand something about me before this story goes anywhere. I am not a dramatic person. I don't attract chaos. I wake up, I work, I eat cereal for dinner more than I'd like to admit, and I go to bed. That's it. That was my entire life. So when I tell you what happened, I need you to know I was just as blindsided as you're about to be. It started because of Celeste, my friend Celeste, sweet, chronically late, absolutely incapable of reading a room, needed help with a property transfer at a city administrative office. Her late aunt had left behind a small apartment, and there were papers to sign, documents to submit, standard, boring bureaucracy. She asked me to come with her for moral support. I said yes, because that's what you do. Except Celeste forgot one of the documents back at her apartment, and instead of waiting, like a normal, patient, thinking human being, she looked at me, pointed to a sticky note on a page, and said, "Just sign where it says. I'll literally be back in 20 minutes." And then she left. I signed. And I slid the paper across the desk. And when I looked up, the clerk wasn't there, but someone else was. Sitting across from me, completely still, in a suit that looked like it cost more than 3 months of my rent. Dark eyes, no expression, just watching me with this look I cannot describe except to say it didn't feel like the look of a stranger. The clerk came back. He looked between us and said, very carefully, "The co-signature is registered. The transfer is binding." And I said, "Wait, what transfer?" Here's the part I still can't fully explain. My first instinct wasn't even panic. It was this weird, floaty confusion, like when you step off a curb you didn't see coming. I looked at the man across from me and said, very calmly, "I think there's been a mistake. I'm not whoever was supposed to sign this." And he looked at me, just looked for a long second and said, "I know exactly who you are, Nadia." He said my name. He said it like he'd said it before. Not loudly, not strangely, just quietly, the way you say a word you've known for a long time. And I had never seen this man before in my life. I tried to laugh it off. I told him we could sort it out in the morning, annul it, reverse whatever had happened, no hard feelings. And he said, and I will never forget this, "This isn't an error." That was it. Calm. Final. Like a door closing softly but locking anyway. I went home. I did not sleep. I spent 4 hours that night with 3 browser tabs open and my hands slowly going cold. Adrian Cole, 34 years old, technology infrastructure, the quiet, invisible kind that runs underneath everything else. No red carpets, almost no interviews, 1 photo in the press per year, if that. And every single profile, every article, every mention said the same thing. This was a man who did not make mistakes, who did not miscalculate, who had never, in over a decade of public record, been caught off guard by anything. So why was his document in front of me? Why was Celeste conveniently not in that room? I called her at 2 a.m. She picked up on the second ring and sounded guilty before I even said a word. She said she'd explain. She never really did. 3 days later, his legal team contacted me. I almost ignored it. Raina, my best friend, the most practical person I have ever met, sat across from me at my kitchen table and said, "Nadia, you accidentally married a billionaire. You go to that meeting." So I went. He was already there when I arrived. Same stillness, same unreadable face, but this time, before I could say anything, he slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal. Not a dissolution, not an apology, a proposal. 1 year. We would remain legally married. I would not owe him anything. In fact, the opposite. I would be compensated well. Something about an inheritance clause, a board of directors, a family condition written into his father's estate that required him to be married before a certain date or lose controlling shares in the company. He explained it clearly, almost clinically. And then he waited. I asked him, why me? Out of everyone, why me specifically? He paused, just barely, just a half second. Then he said, because you meet a specific requirement. I asked what requirement. He didn't answer. I should have left. I want you to know how close I came to standing up and walking out of that building. But I was behind on my studio rent. Raina needed a surgery her insurance wouldn't touch. And something about the way he looked at me, not with arrogance, not with entitlement, but with something that looked almost like relief, stopped me in a way I couldn't rationalize. I signed. Again. 6 weeks later, I moved into his house. It was enormous and quiet, and felt less like a home and more like an idea of one, all clean angles and expensive silence. He was rarely there. When he was polite, never intrusive, never warm, but never unkind either. We coexisted. I told myself that was enough. And then came the storm. The power cut in the East Wing one night. I was trying to find the utility panel, and I ended up in a room I had been told was archival storage. It wasn't storage. It was organized, intentionally organized, like everything else in his life. There were files, physical folders, arranged by year going back decades, and somewhere in the middle of the third shelf, I found a folder with my name on it, Nadia Voss. I opened it, and I genuinely wish I could tell you it was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. There were photos, candid ones, me walking home from school, me at the corner store near the house I grew up in, me at the bus stop I used every single day when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. Notes in careful handwriting, dates, locations, small details, reads by the window, takes the long route home on Fridays, doesn't look when she walks, always listening. I sat down on the floor of that room, and I didn't move for a very long time. I found him in his study at midnight. I put the folder on his desk. He looked at it. He looked at me, and he didn't deny it. He didn't flinch. He just exhaled, like something he'd been bracing for had finally arrived. He started talking before I could. He told me about his father, Adrian Cole, a man who had been in a business arrangement with my father years ago, a dispute, an unresolved financial agreement that, through a chain of legal clauses I can barely trace even now, had implications that eventually reached me. Adrian had found out about me when he was 19. He hadn't sought me out, hadn't contacted me, but he had kept a record, not to interfere, he said, to make sure I was okay, because he had known what his father was doing to my family's stability, and he had been too young to stop it. I looked at him and said, "That is not what okay feels like from where I'm standing." And he said, "I know." That, I know, hit differently than I expected, because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't an excuse, it was just quiet acknowledgement, like he'd been holding the weight of it for a long time and wasn't pretending otherwise. But then he told me the part that wasn't in any file, the part he'd never written down. He'd actually seen me once in person, not through a report, not in a photograph, actually seen me. I was around 9 years old. He was 19, visiting a building my father used to work in, and I was sitting alone in the lobby, waiting for someone who clearly wasn't coming. He said I was reading. He said I looked so completely settled inside myself, so quietly certain in a waiting room full of adult anxiety, that it had never left him. He said he'd felt responsible, not in a way that made sense, not in a way he could explain cleanly, but in the way that young people feel things when they witness an injustice they're too powerless to correct. He watched from a distance because it was the only thing he knew how to do, and somewhere in that watching, over years and years, it had become something he couldn't name and didn't know how to put down. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't forgive him, not that night, not quickly, and not without struggle. But I understood, reluctantly and with a lot of complicated feeling, that the story I thought I was living was more layered than I'd let myself see, that his choices were flawed and his methods were wrong, but the thing underneath them wasn't cruelty. It was guilt that had no clean exit. That's a painful thing to hold, and I think he'd been holding it alone for a very long time. The year ended. The board condition was satisfied. His company stayed intact. He told me I was free. His exact words, quiet and deliberate. "You're free, Nadia." Like he'd been keeping a door open for a long time and could finally let his arm rest. I didn't leave right away. I stayed 3 more weeks. Not for him. I want to be clear about that. For myself. Because I needed to make a decision that belonged entirely to me, with no pressure attached, no contract running, no obligation on either side. And what I decided was that I wasn't ready to close a door I hadn't fully walked through yet. We talked, really talked, in the way 2 people talk when all the performance finally falls away. About his father, about mine, about the years we had each spent building careful distances around ourselves and calling it independence, about how neither of us had really chosen that. It had just become the shape of us. And maybe, somewhere in the accidental wreckage of one misfiled document and a friend who forgot her paperwork, something had been quietly and patiently waiting to break that shape open. He gave me the folder before I finally left, handed it across without my asking, without condition. I took it. I kept it. Not as evidence, not as something to be angry about forever, but because I think I needed proof that somewhere in the years when my world was falling quietly apart, someone had been paying attention. Someone had seen me in a lobby and never fully looked away. That's a hard thing to be angry about once you understand the whole of it. It's also a hard thing to trust. And I think both of those things can be true at the same time without either one canceling the other out. We're not in a fairy tale. We didn't run toward each other. We moved slowly, carefully, honestly, with the full awareness that some things need to be rebuilt before they can be called something good. But we moved, and that, I think, was enough to start with.
If you made it here, thank you. I mean that in a way I can't fully dress up. This story sat in my chest for almost a year before I knew how to let it out. If something in it landed for you, the complicated feelings, the messy truth of someone else's guilt becoming your entire life story, I would love to know in the comments. Tell me what part stopped you, and if you have ever had to completely rewrite a story you thought you already knew the ending to. You already understand exactly what I mean. Subscribe if you want more of the real ones. I'll be back. I used to think love that begins in the wrong room at the wrong time with the wrong signature can't possibly be real. But maybe real was never about clean beginnings. Maybe it's about who's still standing in the room after all the wrong reasons have finally run out.